Good day, my dear learners, Mathematics 8. We are here once again to discuss our lesson on Quarter 3, Module 3, entitled Illustrating Triangle Congruence. This is Ma'am Florence, your virtual teacher for today. So we would like to thank once again DepEd Caraga region for giving us this quarter 3 module 3 SLM. Now kindly proceed to the first page of your SLM, the what I need to know part. After going through this module, you are expected to define triangle congruence, draw and label the corresponding parts of two congruent triangles, identify corresponding parts of two congruent triangles, and relate triangle congruence in real life. And so before we proceed further with your SLM today, I want you to prepare your ball pens, pencil, or any writing materials that is available with you right now, and use the activity or the answer sheet that was provided by your teacher to you. Do you have knowledge about triangle congruence? We will check if you have already prerequisite skills and knowledge about our topic today on triangle congruence. I want you to answer page 2 to 4 of your SLM, the what I know. This is a pre-assessment test. Your scores here will not affect your grade. All we need to know is that do you have an inner knowledge or skills about triangle congruence. So, using your activity or answer sheet provided by your teacher, write the letters of the correct answer there. Do not write anything in your SLM. All the answers should be written on your answer sheet. You may now begin. Now, since you are done working and answering on your pre-assessment test, we shall now proceed to page 5 of your SLM. We are about to begin lesson 1 on illustrating triangle congruence. From the word congruence, we can have the word congruent. And what does congruent means? Congruent means it must be equal. The shape of an object must be equal. And also the size. The size must be equal. In length, the size must be the same. Designs and patterns having the same size and shape thrives in almost every places. Take note that this can be seen in the structures, bridges, condominiums, hotels, even churches, or any other infrastructures. It could also be seen among the furnitures and appliances, as well as in the fabrics and crafts. Triangle is one of the most important figures studied in geometry, in particularly in mathematics, because of its many uses in the real world. Let us get to know more about triangles. because since there are array of activities in your module, you're going to perform one by one these activities. Let us start with what's in. The first activity there is called Identify VAS. Identify VAS. V stands for vertices. Take note that vertices is the plural word of vertex. Okay, so the plural word of that is vertices. Okay, another is A, which stands for angles, and S, which stands for sides. So you are going to identify VAS of a triangle. From this abbreviation VAS, it refers to the vertices, the angles, and the sides of a triangle. That's right. Suppose you have here triangle ABC. In triangle ABC, the primary parts are the vertices, the angles, as well as the sides. Let's go to vertices. The vertices are actually the endpoints joined together, right? In order to form a triangle. So what are these? What are these vertices of our triangle ABC? Let us start with vertex A. So we may write vertices are vertex A. Also, we have vertex B here. And then we also have vertex C. So these are the vertices of triangle ABC. Okay, then let's go to the angles. Now the angles is actually the interior angles of our triangle ABC. So first, we have here angle A there. Also, we have angle B. And also, we have here angle C, the third angle. So how many angles do we have there? We have angle A, angle B, and angle C. Take note that our angle could be named using the vertices. So therefore, do not forget to write the angle, okay, as a symbol for our angle. We have now angle A. Also, we have angle B. And we have angle C. So how many angles do we have? 3. How many vertices do we have? 3. Let's go to the sides. Take note that the sides are the line segments joining the vertices, joining the endpoints. So, to name them, we have segment AB, that's right. The first side here is segment AB. Then we also have the second side, segment BC. And the third side is segment AC. So take note, there must be a symbol of a line segment on top of our segment. So, how many sides do we have? We also have 3 sides, segment AB, segment BC, and segment AC. So all in all, in a triangle, we have 3 vertices, 3 angles, and 3 sides. So if you would like to define a triangle, then we can say triangle is a polygon with 3 vertices, 3 angles, and 3 sides. What about another triangle here? This is triangle QRS. Triangle QRS, of course, we will name the vertices, the angles, as well as the sides. But I want you to do that on your own. Using the answer sheet provided by your teacher, I want you to answer. Complete the table there for columns of vertices, column of angles, and column of the sides. Like what we have in the first triangle that I gave you, triangle ABC, we have written the parts of our triangle. The vertices, the angles, as well as the sides. So now it's your turn to write your answers. Do not write anything in your SLM. You can write your answers in the answer sheet provided to you. After you have answered, and after you have identified the vertices, the angles, and the sides, I want you to answer the questions that follows there. There are 4 questions. The first one is, how did you identify the vertices, angles, and side of each triangle? Number 2, how would you define angle? Number 3, what about the definition of a vertex? And number 4, in geometry, what is meant by side? So I have mentioned earlier the different parts of our triangle. It's now your turn to answer the guide questions 1 to 4. You all will also write your answers in the guide questions to the answer sheet provided to you. So again, it's your turn to complete identifying the vertices, angles, and sides of triangle QRS. So this time, I will leave triangle QRS to you to write the vertices, the angles, as well as the sides. You may now begin. Now let us proceed to what's new. On page 6 of your SLM, you are going to do the activity entitled 4 Picks 2 Words. The direction says, you consider the figures below and answer the questions that follow. Given the 4 pictures or figures, analyze it and answer the questions that follow. So, question number 1, what geometric figures were highlighted in the illustrations? There are 4 pictures. What particular geometric figures was highlighted in each pictures? And number 2, what have you observed with the size and the shape of the geometric figures? Explain your answer. I want you to answer the guide questions on the activity sheet that is provided by your teacher. Now, you may begin. Now, as soon as you are done working with the activity entitled 4 Picks 2 Words, let us all proceed to what is it. On the same page, on page 6 of your module, let us begin with our discussions. The first one says, 2 line segments are congruent if their endpoints can be made to coincide. Two line segments are said to be congruent if their endpoints can be made to coincide. Let us draw line segment AB. Okay, shall we call this line segment AB? And we will draw another segment. Let us call this segment XY. If the vertices or the endpoints of AB is made to coincide, or if we try to move segment XY to fit with segment AB and they coincide, that means the two line segments are congruent. Having no less or no more segments, as long as segment AB coincides or fit together with segment XY, then we can conclude that AB is congruent to XY. Take note, guys, of the symbol for congruence. This is the symbol for congruence. Again, we will read this as segment AB is congruent to segment XY. Let us proceed to the second one. Two angles are congruent if their sides can be made to coincide. If two sides form together, creating an angle, okay, if the sides coincide, then the two angles are congruent. So let's say we have a triangle. Let's say we have so we will draw two triangles. Shall we call this triangle ABC? And then another triangle here. Shall we call this triangle XYZ? So suppose we will have segment AB. Shall we have segment AB and segment AC? Segment AB and segment AC intersect with each other, forming an angle here, angle A. On the other side, on the other triangle, triangle XYZ, we have segment XY that corresponds to segment AB. When we say corresponds, it means that when you connect segment XY with segment AB, they will fit together. Remember, two line segments are congruent if their endpoints coincide. So therefore, segment AB here coincide with segment XY. Likewise, segment AC coincide with segment XZ. Segment XY and segment XZ intersect, forming an angle here, angle X. Therefore, since segment AB here, segment AB, since segment AB here coincide with segment XY, then we can say AB is congruent to XY. Likewise, since AC coincide with XZ on the other triangle, then we can also say that AC is congruent to XZ. Going back to the first statement, which says two line segments are congruent if the endpoints coincide. And going back to our statement number 2, which says two angles are congruent if their sides can be made to coincide. Then we can say that angle A here is congruent to angle X. Okay, to write, angle A there is congruent to angle X. Why is angle A congruent to angle X? Because of our statement number 2, which says two angles are congruent. Two angles are congruent if their sides coincide. What are the sides of angle A? We have segment AB, which coincide with the side of angle X, that is XY. Also, another side of triangle ABC, segment AC, coincide with segment XZ of another triangle. So, since the sides coincide, then we can say that angle A is congruent to angle X. Do you get that? What about the statement number 3 there, which says two triangles are equal if they have the same size and shape? So, suppose triangle ABC here is in the shape of a triangle. Triangle XYZ is also in the shape of a triangle. They have the same shape. But what about their size? If segment AB coincide with segment XY and segment AC coincide with segment XZ, then we can also say that segment BC here coincide with segment YZ. And the angle A here, angle B here also coincide with angle Y. Angle C coincide with angle Z. Therefore, since all the sides of triangle ABC coincide with all the sides of triangle XYZ, then we can say that they have the same shape, they also have the same size. Therefore, these two triangles, triangle ABC is equal to triangle XYZ, which will lead to our last statement there, which says two triangles are congruent if their corresponding parts are congruent. Shall we write down the corresponding parts of triangle ABC that is equal to the corresponding parts of triangle XYZ? Let us start with segment AB. Take note that segment AB is congruent to the corresponding part on the other triangle, segment XY. Also, segment AC there is congruent to segment XZ, the corresponding parts. Then, we also have the corresponding part, segment BC, which is congruent to segment YZ. Are the corresponding sides of triangle ABC congruent to the corresponding sides in triangle XYZ? The answer is yes. As we have written here, AB is congruent to XY. BC, or rather AC, is congruent to XZ. And BC is congruent to YZ. What about the angles? We can also write that angle A is congruent to which angle on the other triangle? We have angle X. What about angle B, the second angle? that is also equal to the corresponding angle on the other side. That is angle Y. And the last angle is angle C, which also corresponds to angle Z of the other triangle. What have you noticed? Here, all three angles of angle ABC is congruent to the corresponding angles of triangle XYZ. Thus, the corresponding parts of triangle ABC and triangle XYZ are congruent. The answer is yes. Yes, the corresponding parts are congruent. Therefore, we can now conclude that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle XYZ. Take note that from here, vertex A corresponds to vertex X of the other triangle. Vertex B also corresponds with vertex Y. And vertex C there correspond with vertex Z of the other triangle. All the corresponding parts of triangle ABC is congruent to triangle XYZ. So I have been talking and using the word corresponding parts. Corresponding rather. Corresponding came from the word correspondence. So what is correspondence? What is the definition of correspondence? Pairing the parts of one group to the other parts of another group is called correspondence. It means to say corresponding parts means pair. Corresponding parts means pair. Okay? The pair, the corresponding parts of one triangle, the corresponding parts of one triangle to the corresponding parts of another triangle means that you have to pair the parts. You have to pair the parts and call them corresponding parts. Shall we say we have to get the corresponding sides of triangle NAT to triangle GEO. The corresponding sides there should be the parts where the vertices coincide. Again, when we say corresponding sides, okay, corresponding sides means that the pair of sides from one triangle to another triangle where their vertices coincide. Let's say we have to get side NA. Let's say segment NA corresponds to segment GE of another triangle. So the corresponding sides there are segment NA. Take note of the symbol for correspondence. This is the symbol. So we can say NA corresponds to segment GE, which means that the vertex N corresponds with vertex G. Vertex A corresponds with vertex E. And vertex T should correspond to vertex O. If we are talking about corresponding sides, the vertices must also correspond. Just like in the illustration here, As you can see, vertex N corresponds to vertex G. Vertex A corresponds to vertex E. And vertex T corresponds to vertex O. We can write that here as N corresponds to vertex G. A corresponds to vertex E. And T corresponds to vertex O. So since the vertices corresponds, then the corresponding sides will also be the corresponding sides will also coincide. So NA corresponds to GE. What about AT? Segment AT will also correspond to segment EO. So we may write segment AT corresponds to segment EO. Take note that the corresponding vertices again will still be visible. Segment N corresponds, vertex N corresponds to vertex G. Vertex A corresponds to vertex E. Vertex A corresponds to vertex E, remember? And vertex T corresponds to vertex O. And the last corresponding sides there are segment NT and segment GO. So these are the corresponding sides of our triangle NAT and triangle GEO. And we can also get the corresponding angles. The corresponding angles. Okay, the corresponding angles there are, of course, we have angle N here, which corresponds to angle G. So we can write angle N corresponds to angle G. Also, we have angle A, which corresponds to angle E. So therefore, angle A corresponds to angle E. And lastly, we have angle T corresponds to angle O. Angle T corresponds to angle O. So all in all, we have now the corresponding angles coincide. The corresponding angles of triangle NAT corresponds to the corresponding angles in triangle GEO. Likewise, the corresponding parts, the corresponding sides of triangle NAT coincide with the sides of angle GEO. Okay, as you have noticed, we have here the correspondence also on page 7 of your SLM. The corresponding vertices, as we have listed here, corresponding vertices is also here. Okay, and the corresponding sides The corresponding sides is also listed here, as well as the corresponding angles. Okay? Since the vertices of triangle NAT, the vertices of triangle NAT fit exactly or coincide with the vertices of triangle GEO. Therefore, we can now conclude that triangle NAT is congruent to triangle GEO. Then we can now conclude, make a conclusion that triangle NAT is congruent to triangle GEO. How did we able to make a conclusion that triangle NAT is congruent to triangle GEO? When you go back to the last statement that we have mentioned earlier, two triangles are congruent if their corresponding parts are congruent. We have listed that the corresponding vertices of our triangle NAT coincide with the vertices of triangle GEO. Likewise, their corresponding sides and their corresponding angles coincide. In other words, when you fit together triangle NAT and triangle GEO, they will fit together. They will coincide. So, that makes us go into conclusion that triangle NAT is congruent to triangle GEO because their vertices fit exactly with each other. If you have noticed, we have there a definition of congruent triangles, and it says that two triangles are congruent if and only if the corresponding sides and the corresponding angles are congruent. The corresponding sides here fit together, right? The corresponding sides coincide, as well as the corresponding angles. They coincide or they fit together. Therefore, we can also conclude that the corresponding sides are also congruent. Since the corresponding sides coincide, therefore, we can also say that NA is congruent to GE. AT is congruent to EO. And NT is congruent to GO. So the corresponding sides are also congruent. Likewise, the corresponding angles, since they are corresponding parts of our two triangles, then they coincide. They fit together. Therefore, we can also say angle N is congruent to angle G. Angle A is also congruent to angle E. And angle T is congruent to angle O. So, as you can see, triangle NAT is congruent to triangle GEO and is read as triangle NAT is congruent to triangle GEO. So this is how we write the two congruent triangles. Triangle NAT is congruent to triangle GEO. It implies that the corresponding parts of congruent triangles are also congruent. This will lead us to our abbreviation CPCTC, which means corresponding parts. C stands for corresponding, P stands for parts, C stands for congruent, T triangles, and C is congruent. Again, CPCTC means corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So, when two triangles are congruent, it implies that there is CPCTC. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So, as what we have written earlier, these are the congruent angles where they are corresponding parts of two triangles. Here are the corresponding sides where the corresponding parts of two triangles coincide and are congruent. Let us proceed to example number 1. In example number 1, we have there triangle CAT. We have triangle CAT and triangle DOG. We have triangle CAT. Shall we write? We have there triangle CAT. And we also have triangle DOG. Triangle cat and triangle dog. Now, write down the pairs of corresponding parts. As you have noticed, there are congruent markings among the sides, which tells us that these are the corresponding parts, which are congruent. Since they have similar markings, it means they are the corresponding parts. So shall we list down the corresponding parts of triangle cat and triangle dog? So here is the solution. The congruent parts of congruent triangles can be determined with the help of the arcs and the tick marks. The tick marks here is used on the sides of our triangle to tell us that each side corresponds to another side of the other triangle. While the arc here tells us that the angle of one triangle corresponds and is congruent to another angle of another triangle. So let us discuss what are the corresponding angles. Before we discuss what are the corresponding angles and what are the corresponding sides, let us write down the corresponding vertices first. Here are the corresponding vertices. Make sure that when you list down the corresponding congruent sides and the corresponding congruent angles of two triangles, their vertices must coincide, must correspond also, or must fit together. So, going back to our triangle cat and triangle dog, the corresponding vertices should be vertex C corresponds to vertex D. Vertex A corresponds to vertex O, while vertex F, or rather vertex T, corresponds to vertex G. Now, since the vertices correspond to one another, then we can now identify the corresponding angles. The first one is angle C. Angle C corresponds to angle D. Again, angle C corresponds to angle D. Angle A here, angle A corresponds to angle O of another triangle. And angle T corresponds with angle G of another triangle. So these are the corresponding angles. What about the corresponding sides? Using the tick marks, we can see that CA corresponds to DO. AT corresponds with OG, while CT corresponds to DG. So here are the corresponding sides. Now let's go to example number 2. Given that the two triangles are congruent, triangle P, triangle PSA, and triangle NSO. Triangle PSA is said to be congruent to triangle NSO. Imagine folding together these two triangles. When you fold together triangle PSA with triangle NSO, they will coincide. They will fit together. That is why they are said to be congruent. Now, if triangle PSA is congruent to triangle NSO, what are the corresponding congruent parts? What are the corresponding congruent parts of these two triangles? Before we do that, let us first make sure that the vertices coincide. The vertices of triangle this should be PSA. Triangle PSA. And this one is for triangle NSO. So the vertices must coincide. Vertex P must coincide with vertex N. Vertex S correspond to vertex S of another triangle. Take note that P corresponds to N. Vertex S corresponds to vertex S of another triangle, while vertex A corresponds to vertex O of another triangle. So since the vertices of two triangles correspond to one another, then we can now identify the congruent angles as well as the congruent sides. So what are the congruent angles here? As you have noticed, angle A corresponds to angle O. When you fit them together, vertex O or angle O will coincide with A. So we have here angle P also correspond and is congruent to angle N. And angle PSA. This is angle PSA. Angle PSA. This one here, which correspond to angle NSO here. Okay, so these are the three corresponding congruent angles of triangle PSA and triangle NSO. What about the congruent sides? So the corresponding congruent sides are segment PS is congruent to NS. Okay, and then segment PA is congruent to segment NO, while segment SA is congruent to segment SO. So these are the corresponding congruent angles and corresponding congruent sides of triangle PSA and triangle NSO. Remember, in congruent angles, the vertices must also be corresponding to each other. Also, in the congruent sides, the corresponding vertices must be corresponding to each other. Like vertex P must correspond to vertex N, right? Like here, while vertex S corresponds to vertex S also. Let us go to example number 3. In example number 3, we have two different triangles again. This time, we have here triangle FAE, triangle FAE, and triangle TEA. Okay? Triangle FAE must be congruent to triangle TEA. This time, all you need to do is to fold, or rather, you need to rotate. If triangle FEA, FAE is congruent to triangle TEA, then you need to rotate your triangle. Say you will rotate triangle TEA so that let us list down first the two triangles. Triangle FAE and triangle TEA. Make sure that vertex F corresponds to vertex T. Here, vertex A corresponds to vertex E. Remember, this is vertex A of triangle FAE. And this is vertex E, the corresponding vertex in triangle TEA. That is the corresponding vertex. Again, we have vertex A and vertex E. Now, your vertex A corresponds to vertex E, while your vertex F, A, E, your vertex E of triangle FAE corresponds to vertex A of triangle TEA. Vertex E corresponds with vertex A. That means to say, you can rotate triangle TAE so that T will fit with F, your A will fit with E, and your E will fit with A. Do you get that? You will need to rotate triangle TEA so that their corresponding vertices will fit with the one another. Now, if the corresponding vertices here coincide with one another, then now we can list down the corresponding angles as well as the corresponding sides. Corresponding angles and corresponding sides. Shall we begin? Remember, there are tick marks that corresponds to the tick marks of another triangle, as well as there are arcs that corresponds to the corresponding arc of another triangle. So we have the first pair of corresponding angles. We have angle F, which corresponds to angle T. Notice that they have the same number of arcs. Then we also have angle FEA. This one correspond to angle TEA. Notice that both angles have the same arc. And last, we have angle FAE, which corresponds to angle TEA. Okay, notice that both angles have the same arcs. Alright, what about the corresponding sides? Okay, notice also that the corresponding sides of triangle FAE has the same number of tick marks with the sides of triangle TEA. So the first one there is segment FA. Segment FA, which corresponds to segment TE. What about the second one? Segment FE. Segment FE here corresponds with segment TA. Remember, when you start with vertex T, or rather vertex F here, you must also begin with vertex T because F corresponds to T. And the last pair is segment EA. Segment EA of triangle FAE corresponds to segment AE of triangle TEA. Remember, vertex E corresponds with vertex A. So segment AE, rather EA, corresponds to segment AE. So here are the corresponding sides and corresponding angles of these two triangles. Then now we can conclude, since the corresponding parts there must also be congruent, then now we can conclude. So we have concluded there that triangle FAE is congruent to triangle TEA because their corresponding parts are congruent. Let us now proceed to example number 4. Assume that segments and angles in the numbered triangles are congruent. Identify which triangles are congruent. So, given here in the illustration, we have a pair of angle 1 and angle 2, angle 3 and angle 4, angle 5 and angle 6. Which among the pairs here are congruent? So, solution. Looking at the figures, it can be deduced that angle 1 is congruent to which one? Which angle? Angle 1 is congruent to angle 6. Angle 2 is congruent to angle 5. And angle 3 here is congruent to angle 4. Remember, triangles that have exactly the same size and shape are congruent. Two triangles are congruent if their corresponding sides and angles are congruent. And two triangles are congruent if they fit exactly or coincide when one triangle is put on top of the other. Now I think you are ready to proceed with more activities. On page 11, what's more? We have different activities provided for you here. Let us start with the first one. Activity 1, find my partner. Okay, find my partner. So in this case, you will be pairing parts of one triangle to the parts of another triangle. Note that the notation corresponding shows corresponding parts. Copy the table on your answer sheet. Remember, you are provided with an answer sheet. And supply the missing part of the triangle that will make each correspondence complete. Answer the questions also that follows. Here we have blank. Under the column corresponding vertices, we have blanks that you will need to fill in. Also, in the corresponding angles and the corresponding sides, you need to fill in the blank to complete the statements given there. Okay, following that, on top of the table are, we have there triangle A, B, C, and we have triangle D, E, F. So, supply the corresponding vertices, corresponding angles, and the corresponding sides. Then, afterwards, if you are done completing the table, the blanks in each table, answer the questions, what have you noticed on the given triangles? Number 2, what does the mark of the angles here and the sides of the triangle indicate? Number 3, are there angles and sides that have the same measure and length? Explain your answer. And number 4, describe the relationship between triangle ABC and triangle DEF. I'll give you time to answer. You may begin. If you're done with activity 1, you may go to page 12 of your SLM on activity 2, draw and name. Okay, you need to draw and name. All right, do what is asked. You are given an answer sheet, so you write everything on your answer sheet. Example number 1, draw triangle ACT congruent to triangle NOW. Put the identical markings on corresponding congruent parts. Given already that triangle ACT is congruent to triangle NOW, or triangle ACT is congruent to triangle NOW. Given that this is congruent, you are asked to draw these two triangles and put the identical markings. You label carefully. Make sure that when you label, the corresponding parts are congruent. So you put the corresponding markings. On the sides, you write the corresponding tick marks. On the angle, you write the corresponding arcs. That is for number 1. For number 2, triangle STR, triangle S, here, triangle STR is congruent to triangle RAS. Again, triangle STR is congruent to triangle RAS. Think if you're going to flip or to rotate or to fold these two triangles so that their corresponding parts must be congruent or must coincide. Then, you name the 6 pairs of the corresponding congruent parts. 3 pairs for the congruent angles and 3 pairs for the congruent sides. Using your answer sheet, you write your answers there for number 2. And for number 3, listed below are the 6 pairs of the corresponding parts of 2 congruent triangles. Okay, here are the corresponding congruent parts, the congruent angles, as well as the congruent sides. Given this corresponding congruent angles and congruent sides, you name here in the table. You name what is the congruent triangles. Again, given the corresponding parts are congruent angles and congruent sides. You may name now. Here, you write. You write here what are the congruent triangles. You may now begin. Once you are done working, I want you now to proceed on page 13 of your SLM. This time, you're going to answer activity on what I have learned. Given the figure here at the center, we have here the figure of two triangles. We have triangle. We could have triangle REM. And we have triangle COM. Okay, I want you to answer the questions numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Write your answers to each of these questions on the given answer sheet. Let us see how far have you learned since we have finished discussing about triangle congruence. Let us see if you have gained some knowledge from that lesson. Okay? Answer questions numbers 1 to 6 according to the illustration at the center. Now you may begin. Now, as soon as you are done answering what I have learned, you are now ready to continue with page 14 of your SLM on what I can do. Given here the illustration, one of the structural applications of triangles can be seen in bridges, right? In the illustration here, there are pairs of congruent triangles. Please be observant and see which pair here are congruent triangles. There are pairs of triangles in there. Do what is asked in the questions or in the directions here. Do what is asked. Number 1, select a pair of congruent triangles. You may select a pair of congruent triangles. Just select one. Label these triangles as triangle SAF and triangle EAF. It could be this one, this pair here. It could be this pair here or this pair. You just select one pair and call it triangle SAF and triangle EAF. Number 3, put similar markings to show clearly the congruent sides and the congruent angles. Remember, to the congruent sides, you have to put similar tick marks. To the corresponding congruent angles, you have to put similar arcs. And number 4, list down the corresponding congruent parts of these two congruent triangles. Again, for number 4, you have to list down the corresponding congruent parts. Now, you may begin. After working and finishing all the activities, the array of activities given to you on this module, on triangle congruence, I think you are now ready for the post-assessment test. Now, your post-assessment test the result of your post-assessment test should be greater or higher than the result of your pre-assessment because you have already listened to all the topics that we have discussed on triangle congruence. So you must have a higher score here in the post-assessment test compared to your pre-assessment test. Are you ready? There are still 15 items or 15 numbers which are about to answer. Make sure that you read and understand each item. Then choose the letter of the correct answer. You write the letters of your answers on the answer sheet that was given to you. So, your 15-item post-assessment test may now begin. After working on the post-assessment test, you will still have to use your answer sheet provided by your teacher to answer the additional activities given there. Do what is asked. Okay, given is an illustration here. Separate the overlapping triangles. You separate the overlapping triangles. It could be this pair and this pair. You just choose which one. Which overlapping triangles will you use and separate them? You draw here the separate triangles. There must be two triangles here. Two triangles should be drawn here, separating the overlapping triangles. And for number 2, you need to put the identical or the similar markings to show clearly that the congruent sides and the congruent angles of these two triangles here, overlapping triangles here, must be congruent. Again, for number 2, you draw again the same overlapping triangles here in number 2 table, but you have to write the identical or similar markings in the congruent sides as well as in the congruent angles. And if you are done working on the additional activities, you may check your answers in the activity sheet, in the last page of your module, which is the answer key. Thank you for watching our interactive video, and I hope that this interactive video provided to you is helpful for you to work on your module 3 or SLM module 3. I'll see you again on our module 4 next video. Goodbye and have a good day, everyone.